You're listening to Talk Radio Europe.
Daybreak.
Good morning. It's just gone 9:20. Back with us on the show is Michael Brown. He's a business founder, a long-term managing director, and a social enterprise pioneer, helping to create, launch, and lead what is thought to be the world's first mental health drop-in centre inside a soup kitchen. His book, I Don't Agree, is a 10-step guide to navigating all types of conflict by recognising and respecting our differences, whatever the argument. We chatted when the book came out in hardback last year, but we have him on again because it's a great subject. I think people are arguing more now than they perhaps were last year. And the book has just taken gold at the Business Book Awards. Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm very happy to be here too. Yes, I'm still bathing in the glory of that particular win. Yes, I wasn't expecting it. Sure.
Oh, fabulous! I mean, what does it mean to you? What was the kind of what was your competition like?
Well, the competition seemed fairly stiff, it had to be said, and certainly I certainly got an insight into the world of publishing awards, because they publish a long list first, and they have a bit of a long list party to announce that, and that long list had 280 books on it.
Gosh!
So that's fairly slender odds, isn't it? And I thought, oh well, even if I get to the short list, that'll be an achievement. And then the short list, it went down to 80 books. And I was delighted to be on that shortlist, and then they break it down into categories from that, and they have a shortlist party, and then they have another party to announce the winners, which I think it all sounds like it's just a great excuse for having lots of parties.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So, did you get to go to any of the parties?
Well, as has been commonly the case, the whole COVID thing it was intended to be a sort of glamorous black tie do, and they did try to recreate that with a great deal of success, I must say. It was, 2 or 3 weeks ago now? Yeah, 3 weeks ago. They had this wonderful platform where they asked me to dress in black tie, and I was thinking, does that mean I'm a winner? Does that? Yes, I did try to see if there's any subtle hints in there. So they asked me to log on at a certain date, and they had this lovely digital world with a sort of table plan, and you became an avatar, and you could stroll between the tables. You could tap people on the shoulder. Other authors, other people in the publishing will have a little screen-to-screen chat or open it up to the table. And then I think they went to YouTube then to announce the winners. There were 8 categories altogether, and then they asked us to switch our cameras off and be muted, and then I got the I wasn't really expected to win. I had my black tie on, but I was in my kitchen at home in Brighton, and when I heard my name, I jumped up. Jumped up in the air. Actually, I was genuinely wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
And I realised at that point as well that they'd forced my camera on, so I wasn't quite prepared. You know, all that media training you think you might do when you're about to say some kind of important words. That sort of never happened. I was still gesticulating to my wife off camera to say, "Look, I've won," and trying to drag her in. And then I realised that they turned the camera on, and all of that was revealed to the guests. So it wasn't particularly dignified, shall we say.
Oh, never mind. You won. So I thought it would be interesting to get you back on, because I think this is a subject that a lot of people will be interested to hear and talk about at the moment. There does seem to be a lot of arguing going on. Obviously, sorry, go on.
No, Hannah, you're absolutely right, and worse than that, we seem to have lost the art of debate, don't we? And we certainly don't seem to listen to each other. If you think about disagreement, it should be the natural human. It should be natural human discourse. It should be okay for somebody to disagree with your worldview. And indeed, if you do want to change the world, you will inevitably come up against lots and lots of people who disagree with your particular standpoint. Yet we stand on either side of a vast canyon, don't we, of disagreement, and just shouting our opinion at each other. And of course, it falls on deaf ears. But there's a phenomena which it's called attribution bias. It's been known to psychology as that since the 1950s, and it does pay into the fact that disagreement often escalates when you try to sort it out. And the reason being, a big chunk of that reasoning is that lots of research prove time and time again that people in dispute typically assume that their own motivations are true and just. And any of the deadlocks that prevent everyone moving forward in an argument or a negotiation are statistically likely to be blamed on the other side by both sides, which is quite an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? It's called attribution bias. And if you can sort of acknowledge that, then you can probably begin to take a step back and say, oh, hang on a minute, am I actually listening? Am I attributing all of the blame to the other side? Have I got a role in the blame? And start, and then you can get into a sort of journey of introspection, really, to your own motives. So that was, I think, one of the reasoning. And then there's another thing, and it goes back to our genes. And you probably anyone who's I guess studied biology may be familiar with it. There's the instinctive threat system, and that is it's an internal alarm, and it warns to danger essentially by creating feelings of anxiety, fear, or aversion, and it does that in order to motivate us to action, and it triggers our fight-flight response. So you often get that in an argument, and it has a justifiable place in our biology, because in fact it's the reason your listeners can tune in right now, because in prehistory a countless number of everyone's direct ancestors will have successfully deployed the system in all manner of dangerous confrontations, perhaps on an unexpected encounter with a saber-toothed tiger, for instance, while out on a stroll with the family. But here's the thing though, and this is why it's relevant today, is it doesn't necessarily need a moment of danger to trigger it. Because this instinctive threat system is hardwired, we're biased towards processing threat-based information. So it captures our attention more powerfully than positive information does. And so we're always vigilant at all times. Subconsciously, it permeates our interactions with our family, our friends, colleagues, our teammates, our bosses. And for some of us, even the smallest criticism of our actions can get the adrenaline running and all the attendant bodily reactions, increased heart rate, sweating, anxiety, and crucially, outright hostility to the other person in the conversation. And if you think about it, and I don't know if you have a performance review at radio, but if your listeners have ever experienced a performance review, your memory of it aren't generally the superlatives used to describe your good bits. It's the areas for improvement that stick in the mind, and it's that negative bias that triggers your threat-based emotions, such as fear or anger, which they motivate us to protect ourselves, and that might result in, after thoughtful consideration and a deep breath or two, in an attempt to improve on our weaknesses or take a step back in an argument or a debate, or Donald Trump style, I guess, slamming a fist onto the red button to launch angry missiles at our perceived tormentors. So I think it's those two phenomena, attribution bias and our instinctive threat system, that are largely responsible for the predicament we find in the present day.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned anxiety and fear, and I think they're two of the things that most people will have been experiencing in this past year because of everything that's been going on. And we've sort of gone from Brexit, where there were two opposing views and people were very, very hostile to people who thought the opposite and just couldn't get their heads around how people could not think the same as them. And it was very difficult to have a normal conversation or debate with someone who had the opposing view to yours, to now having a much, much bigger problem, I think, because it's to do with health and saving people's lives and looking after yourself and looking after other people. And again, having differences of opinion on the whole lockdown thing, the vaccinations, all this kind of thing is becoming a real issue for people. It's really hard to just talk about it, isn't it?
Oh, God. I know, and doing so certainly does risk some inflamed tempers, doesn't it? Yeah. I've certainly learned to back off on my own opinions on how we should act within the pandemic, and also there's no right or wrong answer, or there doesn't appear to be. Certainly, science seems to be baffling us, as you say, and in fact, you can look at two different scientific opinions, can't you? And they also seem to be at odds with each other. And of course, we then gravitate, don't we, towards people. And it's, again, that infamous social, the infamous bubble, if you like, of social media. We gravitate towards people with the same set of views as us, don't we? And therefore widen the canyon of debate between us. That strikes me as some older, because obviously I did a lot of research for the book, and there's another thing that strikes the mind, and it's based on some research, actually, which I'll try and recall it, Hannah. It's called Not Like Me Equals Bad, and it's from the whole load of researchers from the University of British Columbia and Chicago and Yale, and it's about how we distrust. There's a fear of what's called dissimilar others, and dissimilar others are anyone who's not like us, and of course that could be. It's got wide reach. This really, of course, that could be things like race, but it could also be things like opinion. People who hold opinions to us. And in the report is really revealing. So, for instance, it shows, and this is done over years and years, that people tend to choose partners, if you like, that we believe to be of similar physical attractiveness to ourselves. So we all kind of get that instinctively. It's why we all smirk when we hear the backhanded compliment that somebody is punching above their weight in the dating state. They've broken the rules of attraction. But then, but get this, but then it goes the other way. So dissimilarity with other people is a high predictor of avoidance of others. So whereas similarity tends towards friendship formation or group formation, dissimilarity, however slight, works the other way. And this is really, and this gets really profound. So it's thought that people look at dissimilar others as less trustworthy as themselves, as less competent as themselves, as less honest. So on all of those things, instinctive, hardwired things that you have to work around intellectually, actually, to get round that. Once you recognise your biology is working against you in terms of effective collaboration, in terms of breaking down prejudices and biases and unconscious biases, then you can begin to deal with the subject. And that's the Brexit thing. It's like we gravitate towards those people with the opinions, and we form a large group of the same or roughly similar to ours, and we become exceptionally distrusting of people with a counter argument, no matter how much science it's backed up with. So that's interesting. I'll send you the link to that report. When was it? So it's really interesting stuff.
Because we should be able to, whether it's about Brexit or the pandemic or vaccinations or whatever, we should be able to sit down with people and say, well, I believe this because I've read such and such and it said this, and I saw a report that said this, and so therefore I believe this is the way forward. And somebody else should be able to say, oh, that's interesting because I read something else which said something completely different, which of course is happening all the time. And then you can go, oh yeah, well, yeah, I see why you'd think that. I mean, that's the point. As you said, there is science out there, supposedly, that back up both sides of the argument. So therefore, it depends which scientific papers people are reading and believing as to where their views are coming from.
Well, that goes back, actually, it's interesting, Hannah, you bring that back, because that goes back up to the first part of our conversation, this attribution bias. So not only there's a thing, and I didn't invent this, and I can't remember the people who, I know it's Tavris, and anyway, it's called the Pyramid of Choice. And I'll try and remember the creators of the Pyramid of Choice. It's a psychological model, and it describes people with roughly similar opinions standing at the top of a pyramid, and then they might have a minor disagreement about the way something gets done. Say, for instance, they're colleagues working in the same organisation, and there's a way that a particular task, and they might have a slight disagreement, and then they take a little step down either side of the pyramid, and then they because they're going down a pyramid either side, they become a little bit distant, and at that point they look around for things and evidence to corroborate their own argument as to the way something should be done, but totally ignore, and again it goes back to any evidence that backs up the other person's point of view. And again, it's a psychological instinct. You retreat back to the view you want to progress. And then, of course, you get further and further down the pyramid by increment in this psychological model. And, of course, when you're standing at the base of it, you're actually miles apart, but it's done in incremental stages, but based on looking for evidence that backs up your argument and totally ignoring evidence and being willfully blind to the counter, the person on the other side of the desk. So, interesting stuff, yeah.
It really is. Well, if people want to get a copy of your book, it's called I Don't Agree. It's a 10-step guide to navigating all types of conflict by recognising and respecting our differences. It's by Michael Brown, who we've been chatting to. Michael, thanks so much for joining us again, and congratulations on your new award.
Thank you. I'm wearing my gold medal now. So
Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Hannah. Much appreciated.
TRE.